Hello and welcome to The Print. I am Debdutta, and today we are joined by a distinguished guest, retired entrepreneur and author Jaithirth Rao, who is also an esteemed print columnist. And today we are here to discuss more on his article that talks about why India must prepare for mightier neighbors. So, sir, before I kind of jump into the larger questions, I want to start with a very basic question, which is why did you decide to write this article?
It seemed to me that one of the um, negatives, if you will, is in the chest thumping and being happy, which we all should be about our performance. Uh, we may get complacent. And I felt that we need to be thinking next steps and the future because we have fought with Pakistan several times.
Right.
47, 65, 71, whatever. So these are kind of recurring things. And we need to be futuristic and ready. So, in that context, I also wanted to praise some of the good things we have done in our country and see how we can use them as a foundation to do some incredibly more good things. Not just good, but incredibly good.
Right.
Things. So that was a kind of a positive article, which was futuristic.
Absolutely. I would completely agree with that. And, in the course of your article, there's a recurring theme on escalation dominance. I would love for you to elaborate more on that. But, the fact about how technology is often the key differentiator when it comes to wars or escalations. If you could unpack what this means in the broader context and what your take is on that.
Yeah. First of all, escalation dominance is not my expression. I picked it up while watching John Mearsheimer, professor of political science at U Chicago, and he uses this expression quite often. Uh, Escalation dominance is when battles, wars, campaigns have turning points. In phase one, you are doing something. When it gets to phase two, do you have the technological and the personnel wherewithal to effectively do well there? You don't have to win, you have to dominate. That's good enough. I'll give you, I might bore some of your viewers, but I do want to go back a little bit in history to give them some ideas of technology and escalation down. There is a view in the history of cavalry that the invention of the stirrup, before the stirrup, people riding horses could easily fall off. But the invention of the stirrup changed. So whichever army had the stirrup in its cavalry could defeat the other one quite easily. So that's one kind of way where technology creates opportunities for dominance. But the real example of escalation dominance I want to use goes back to 1740. In 1740, in the Battle of Santome, near Madras then, the French had a small army, some Indian soldiers, some French soldiers, but very small outfit. And the Nawab of our court, Nawab of Karnataka, he had a big army, particularly big cavalry. And the battle took place. The French opened the battle by firing their cannons. So the reason I'm using this example, it's not just about technology, but it's about technology and organization put together. Now, normally in most battles till then, once an artillery cannon fire took place, it took 15 minutes to reload the cannon and do the second round of firing. And the standard Indian military strategy was, in that 15 minutes, to overwhelm the cannons with cavalry and capture the guns so that there can be no second cannon charge. So, since they had literally tens of thousands of cavalrymen, that's precisely what the Nawab's army did it. If you want to read about this, read a book by Mallison, Malleson. He has covered this battle. And what they discovered that it was not taking 15 minutes. This young French general was reloading the cannons and heading back within a minute or two. So, in fact, when the cavalry came under attack, they faced withering cannon fire and they were totally surprised. They thought he must have more cannons. It's impossible for him to have reloaded in 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, and fired at us. Probably he's got hundreds of cannons. He had a couple of dozen cannons. So the combination of technology, which is good cannons, and the organization, how to manage those cannons in a way that you don't delay 15 minutes, you fire faster, ensured the victory. And in fact, that is considered by many historians the first major victory of a European power against an Indian power in the history of our country. And it established the principle that a small European led army could defeat large Indian armies.
Right.
So this is what is called escalation dominance. You start, the other person escalates, and then you're able to dominate the next phase. There is no point in starting phase one if in phase two, so, when the enemy responds, you're not able to do well. I mean, again, this is dominance. This is not complete victory. You must be very clear about it. Complete victory is a completely different thing, but it is dominance. And that is what modern warfare is all about. I mean, if you look at the Russians and Germans on the Eastern Front in the Second World War, by 1944-45, the Russians had escalation dominance. So even though the German army was a fine fighting force, it continually had to fall back. Anyway, that's the background of escalation dominance. Now, why is escalation dominance so important in the Indian context? It's very important because, our Prime Minister said something very interesting. This is not a time for war. This is also not a time for terrorism.
Right.
So what he's trying to imply is that, this kind of full-scale war like Russia-Ukraine is not the answer, grabbing somebody else's territory. This is not going to work out in today's world. What is going to work out is the absence of full-scale war doesn't mean that terrorism can get away. There has to be, many people in the US have argued that the US should have withdrawn from Iraq immediately after Saddam Hussein's capture and let the Iraqi situation go on. Instead, they stayed for years and years and years. So I think the Prime Minister is talking about this limited domination to ensure that recurring terrorism is punished, is not rewarded, and is kept within bounds. I don't think terrorism will ever go away, but it can be kept within bounds. So that's why this is important for us. When we do something, they are going to do something. Are we ready at the next stage? Do we have the technological wherewithal? Like the French guy in 1740, do we have the ability to use our cannons faster so that the overwhelming 30,000 cavalrymen cannot take over our guns? That's the kind of way one needs to think about this.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fascinating story that you shared, and it makes things a lot more clearer. And, drawing on that, in your article, you also draw a very clear contrast between India and Pakistan's economic and technological trajectories. And based on that, I wanted to ask you that do you think this disparity between these trajectories alone can or will neutralize security threats from Pakistan given its nuclear capabilities right now? and the strategic alliances it has with, say, Turkey, and thanking Azerbaijan at this point. So drawing up on the fact that even our prime minister in his speech said that this is not the we will not no longer be blackmailed by the whole nuclear thing. How do you think this
No,
disparity
you
plays
are
out?
absolutely right. Merely because we are economically, technologically more advanced than Pakistan, that is not sufficient. In
Right.
fact, I have not directly mentioned it in the article, but I've indirectly hinted at it. Because Pakistan's human capital is extremely low. They cannot create a DRDO and ISRO. They cannot, do the stuff that we are doing relatively comfortably. But we need to measure ourselves not just against Pakistan's human capital and technology, but against that of Turkey and China. So if China is willing to give its latest equipment, they're unlikely, by the way. They'll always give half a generation older equipment, but you never know. You can't predict. They might give their latest equipment. And it's also a useful place for China to test out their equipment. They don't have to invade Taiwan. They can do it at a low cost, a low human cost, have Pakistan be the kind of laboratory experiment for their equipment. And Turkey, as human capital and technology, is not to be underestimated. So we need to see that our weaponry, our capabilities match uh, sufficiently what Turkey and China may provide Pakistan. And frankly, even if there were no Pakistan, I think we should, now that we are a reasonably large economy, I wouldn't have suggested this 20 or 30 years ago, but now that we are a reasonably large economy, um, I think it is high time we create the defense industrial complex ecosystem that keeps us as the best, as one of the best in the world. Uh, so when people talk about good defense technology, who do they talk about? Of course, America, China. They also talk about Sweden. They talk about France, and a little bit now about Turkey. We should be in that group, irrespective of whether there is a Pakistan or not, because we are a large country and we have defense needs to be there. Typically, going back in history, the British imperial state in India was very reluctant to invest in creating factories with very advanced stuff because they were scared of Indians rebelling, as they said, what we would call Indians revolting. They therefore did have ordnance factories, but relatively primitive, relatively limited. We pretty much underinvested in defense industrial complex. And I've mentioned that in my article. The first thing is we excluded the private sector. We made it an entirely state sector monopoly. That was a mistake because a lot of the animal spirits in innovation in military technology comes from the private sector in every country in the world. Even these Turkish drones are made by a private sector company. And certainly Swedish guns or planes are made by private sector companies. I'm not even mentioning America or China, but even there. So that was a big mistake. The second mistake we kind of made was we kind of were very hesitant to export weapons. So a bit of a pacifist view of the world. We shouldn't be weapons exporters. Now, you don't export weapons, you don't create world-class weapons because you're not competing in an international fair with guns from Czechoslovakia, from this, that your stuff is as good or better. So then your quality declines. We also created, I don't think the British had so much, but we certainly created it, an extremely elaborate bureaucratic process for weapons acquisitions. RFP, RFI, this, tender, continued negotiations, extra negotiations, and extremely difficult one. And one of the problems about our bureaucratic system is that there is great punishment for something that goes wrong. There's no reward or very little reward for something that goes right. I see a difference this time. We're actually congratulating DRDO and the whole country is. So maybe we are now moving away, at least in the general public, but I don't think it's within the bureaucratic system. If India is importing something from some country,
Right.
and I am a middle-level defense ministry officer, and I write a one-page note saying this is good, it could be better, but this is about the best that is available today in the world, and we don't have, and they're giving us decent terms. Future repairs and services can be done in India. Let's buy this. Suppose I write a simple note like that. It's better not to take a decision, to postpone it, to have more discussions, more committees, than to actually take a decision. And this cripples everything. So unless we do both of these, encourage the animal spirits of the private sector, and we change our bureaucratic process. We're doing it, but we're not doing it fast enough, is my argument. We should do it faster. And we will not. And by the way, this is not unique to us. Right now, one of the biggest criticisms of the Pentagon is that their procurement process is so screwed up that they are not using all the startups and all the vigor in the American technological industry to their advantage. So, this happens. This happens with bureaucracies, and there's been a lot of atrophy. So those are the changes we need to look at. Greater encouragement to the private sector, and not see them as problems, but as partners. This is a very important thing that we have to learn from the Japanese and the Koreans. The large Japanese companies and Korean companies are not seen as antagonistic to the state. They are seen as partners of the state. Now, what is the point? How can you become big if you don't have prosperous companies? So this constant attack on large companies, or even small companies for that matter, I'll talk about that, is not helping us. We need to encourage many more Indian business groups to get into defense production. We can even have joint ventures with the Koreans and the Japanese and the Czechs and the Swedes, provided we have majority control and management control in Indian hands. We can do that because these are friendly countries and are unlikely to become problems. If we don't develop this defense industrial complex ourselves, several things happen. Like if you watch Shekhar's latest thing, we ordered 5 batteries of S-400s from Russia. They've only delivered 3, not because they have become our adversaries, but because they need the other 2 in their own war. So once you're dependent on someone else for crucial stuff like that, in fact, even in the 1947-48 Kashmir War, one of the concerns was we were dependent on British ammunition, and if we might run out of it. So these things, ammunition, spare parts, repairs, maintenance, and if there's an aircraft loss or a tank loss, how can it be replaced? If you don't have your own defense industrial complex, you're going to be in deep trouble. We cannot be simply a continuous importer. And we have the ability. DRDO has proved that we know. And by the way, both DRDO and Israel are extremely cost competitive. They are very efficient. And going forward, I think we will see that Bharat Forge, L&T, Adani, Tatas, Mahindras, will be cost competitive in the world market. So we should take advantage of these good things that we have and plan for the next. And whether it's in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, there is a next. And as I said, even if there is no next with Pakistan, we are a big enough country that we should worry about our defense and worry about. See, today, this whole idea of free trade, Mr. Trump has questioned it on many grounds, including the grounds of security. I think in one of his speeches, he said, "What is this incubators and masks we have to import when there's a pandemic?" It's a quest security issue. It's not just a free trade or good cost and price and quality issue. It transcends simple macroeconomic discussions. And that is why, and we have all the good things. We have excellent software, human capital, and most of these weapons now are driven by software. And I contest this view that we are not good at metal bending, that therefore we cannot make hardware. That is absurd. We are very good at metal bending. We have just throttled our metal bending industries. In my own home district of Coimbatore, so many foundries closed down over the last 30 years simply because power was too unpredictable and too expensive. Those foundries could have become huge, world class companies. And today they can be reopened, and those entrepreneurs exist. The engineering talent exists. We can create massive metal bending. Bharat Forge can do it. We can create massive metal bending institutions in our country so that we can actually do the hardware too. So I reject that view that somehow we can do software and services, but we can't do. We can't do because we've throttled it. And I've used one example of the throttling. The tax department routinely attacks these small companies all the time. It's almost like a war. They keep sending notices, making assessments without any, destroying small companies. And unless we change those and really make our environment business friendly. And then there's the issue of corruption. There's corruption in defense dealing, in all dealings around the world. We can't keep only focusing on the corruption bogey and beating ourselves up and going on witch hunts. If overall we succeed, let's take a look at startups. We already have some very good defense startups in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, etc. We should have 100 more, 200 more. Out of that, 20 will, what 20? 180 out of 200 may go bust. But 20 will do well. We should not have organized commissions of inquiry, witch hunts about why they went bust, why did we support them, why did we encourage them. Come on. These are new technologies that they are playing with. And something goes right, something goes wrong. And if we make it, by the way, this can be a real multiplier on the manufacture. We already want to manufacture, and we've been struggling to create a manufacturing base in India in general, not just defense. But defense can be at the lead to create that, because remember, many defense technologies then spill over into the private sector, into the civilian sector.
Right.
If I make body armor for soldiers, it can be used by policemen.
Absolutely.
It can be used by forest guards who are trying to prevent poachers, or some variation of that can be used by divers who are doing scuba diving for entertainment purposes. So there's a whole range of advantages of promoting this defense industrial complex. There is capture. I mean, we may become too dependent on it, and we'll worry about that now. We are such a small one. In 20 years, they may become too powerful, and we may have to bring legislation or judgments to make them less powerful. But right now, we are nowhere there. So this is not the time to again start worrying about future problems of success, but try to get going. Because what this has proved You know what? I make that point in my article. Thank God we bought the Rafales.
Yes.
Thank God we got the S-400. If we didn't, we would be in trouble. So this proves that getting good stuff and getting good stuff in time, whether it's imported or ours or jointly made, whatever kind of methodology we use. And I think we should look at using our human capital, our technology, to certainly be better than whatever Pakistan not just has, but also acquires. Let's remember that. They even in 1965, they had Sabre jets. We had Nats and all World War II equipment. So they always cultivate friends and patrons around the world, and they get stuff.
Yeah, that's where the strategic alliances come
Yeah,
to.
they get them. So we have to be good or better. But I think we should not have only a Pakistan focus. We're a large country, large economy. We need to defend ourselves. We are not an offensive country. So I'm not saying we should go and conquer, you know, Siberia or something else. No, that's not the idea. The idea is that we should be at the cutting edge.
Absolutely.
And I kind of end my article with this statement that in 1980s we bought world-class artillery guns from Sweden. In 5 years, I hope we can sell world-class modern military technology to Sweden. We should be there, and that should be our aspiration. It is not difficult to do. We have the software skills, we have the entrepreneurial skills, we have decent relations with many people. As I said, we can do joint ventures with many countries, but we have to make all this easy to have. If everything goes through 17 loopholes, Companies Act, RBI, this, that, and gets held up, then it's not going to happen. I think it won't, and that's why you and I discussed before the program. I have particularly pointed to Parikar and Rajnath Singh
Absolutely. I was
because
mindful.
they have been able to grasp the nettle of dealing with the bureaucracy. You know, there's endless tough fights between the army and the civilians in MOD, between one group of MOD and another group, and then the paralysis that results, people writing more and more notes, developing thicker and thicker files, but no action taking place. That they have been able to grasp a nettle and deal with it. The question is, should it be personality dependent? What if we get another minister and another government which is not uh, got the ability to deal this? Will the bureaucracy revert to its old paralyzing?
Absolutely.
We have to address that. And the same United States, which in 1941 was so vigorous, today, according to Doge, according to their own admissions, the Pentagon is completely, fossilized. So we need to keep at this. Is not a war that is won once. We have to keep fighting this campaign, and we have to make it less personality dependent. We've started well. We've finally come out of. By the way, the same thing was true earlier. When Jivan Ram was made defense minister, many 30, 40, 50 years ago, he did a great job and got the country ready for the 71 war. Despite our big defeat in 62 and our problems in 65, he was able to do it. So the personalities do matter.
Right.
But we should also, as a country, as a people, as you and I, as people fighting this, say, please, we are okay if some mistakes are made. We are okay if some risks are taken. We are okay if there's a little corruption. We're not okay. But we are not, because there's a little corruption, we're not going to kill the whole thing. And we want decisions to be made, and we want diversity in terms of weaponry, in terms of, and uh, you know, great security by making more and more of it in India, or making it in alliance with friendly countries. Now, France has been a reliable partner. So I see a lot of things for us. In fact, not only should we ask them to do joint ventures with Indian companies in India, we can go and set up stuff in France. They
Right.
are unlikely to impose an embargo in a difficult time. Now, some other country, maybe US did in 65. People do impose. Britain did. Britain is the least reliable partner in these matters. But now that they are economically not doing so well, maybe we can do partnerships with them, because ultimately we can get human capital from different parts of the world working with us, and we have good human capital. And keeping security as a key concern in a difficult time, will this come through? That's the important thing. And our excessive dependence on foreign stock of any country. Now, let's look at it, Pakistan situation. This time they got Chinese and Turkish equipment,
Right.
right? What if in 10 years, for some reason, Turkey and China are better disposed to India and they don't give them? What will they do? And even if they have old equipment, they don't have spare parts, they don't have, so these are risks. And luckily for us, over the last 75, 80 years, we have developed enough of an entrepreneurial base, enough of a
Absolutely.
technology base, enough of a human capital base, and our economy is reasonably big and reasonably strong. All this was not true in 1990 or in 1960, but it's true today. And therefore, we need to, this is the right time, if you will, an idea whose time has come. It's already come in the last 5, 10 years. If you see our government, they have been doing this. But we need to now let a thousand flowers bloom.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of really, really important takeaways. The public private partnerships, the industrial potential, the startup potential, the overcoming of the bureaucratic inertia. I think these are extremely key takeaways that we should ponder on. And sir, before we finish this conversation, I just have one last question for you, because we also talked about breaking past the bureaucratic mold, the institutional reforms. In your article, you argue that India does have the talent, which we discussed right now, but it lacks an enabling environment. What, according to you, would be the top three structural changes or administrative changes that would then help, what we discussed, helping build up this whole industrial potential in defense, in working around with these public private partnerships that we talked in detail about? How do you think it can, what are the changes that can help tech entrepreneurs compete globally, especially when it comes to defense sectors like we talked about drones or robotics?
There's a founder of a company called Team Lease in Bangalore who constantly writes about this, about what is the regulatory cholesterol that is holding India back. And I think we need to separate two issues. One is at the central level, what can we do? And then at the state level, what can we do?
Right.
Central level, Department of Defense, procurement process, we've already discussed that endlessly. We need to streamline it, and we need to stop so much turf war, and we need to get rid of this, that any whistleblower, any anonymous letter writer can accuse any official of corruption, holding up everything. Not that there is corruption, we can deal with it, but let's not make it a thing that stops action. And especially this methodology of sabotaging decision making by accusing people, or by just a fear. Why bother? Let me retire. Let my successor take this decision, becomes the problem. So that is at the central level. Another thing at the central level, tax administration. If we want a good private public partnership, our tax administration has to change dramatically
Absolutely.
because he raised that demand. This whole business of giving tax officials targets of revenue to raise should go. Tax officials' job is to implement the law fairly, find people who are avoiding taxes, and find people who are paying taxes.
Right.
It is not to be on a vulture hunt to get more money from the state. Chanakya would certainly have opposed that. But for some reason, I don't know when it started, maybe in the 50s. I'll have to go back and check which finance minister started this thing of tax officials. And now both even GST officials have targets, not just the income tax. So the incentive system is really hindering the growth of a lot of people. So instead of the person who's saying making some infrared defense equipment, spending all his time on the new technology, he's spending 60% of his time going up and down to the chartered accountant's office on tax matters. We just have to stop this. The third thing at the central um, stuff is we have to go back and look at our own successes. Now, space and atomic energy are both successes in India.
Absolutely.
What is common between them? They're both not in Delhi. Atomic energy is in Bombay, space is in Bangalore. They don't have IAS secretaries. They have technocrats. Actually, I think atomic energy many years ago, once for a short while, had an IAS secretary, but usually neither space. 3, they report directly to the PMO. And they have done well. So if this is a kind of best practice that we need to look at. We need to look at whether we can move many more stuff to Hyderabad, Chennai, etc., or to this new park that Yogi Adityanath is starting in UP, so that this Delhi cholesterol doesn't trouble us. Give these people, at least for the next 5-10 years, very high-level access in the government. Homi Baba could pick up the phone and call Panditji anytime. I mean, Vikram Sarabhai could call Indira Gandhi. I mean, this was why these institutions have been built up over a 70-80 period the way they have. And so these are the 3 things at the center that I think we should look at. At the state level, I like this Yogi model. He has created a defense industrial park. Now I would like him to make a public announcement that Inspector Raj tyranny is abolished in the Defense Industrial Park. Because that, to my mind, is the biggest problem. Somebody will come and say, you've not put up a board in Canada on your factory, and that is not bigger than the English board, or something else. You've not painted this warehouse in the last 5 years, and that violates the Painting of Factories Act of 1891. So, this has to stop. And I think we can do that by creating enclaves. Here we should imitate China. This is what Deng Xiaoping did in Guangdong and Shenzhen. He created enclaves. He kept the rest of the country under state sector, but here he created private sector enclaves. So I like this. The announcement was very interesting, and I listened to his speech. I think he's got it. But I would really appreciate if tomorrow he stands up and says, Inspector Raj is abolished. In self-certification will work for 90% of the things. If there is to be inspection, it will be done following this very clear, transparent SOP, not to help corrupt lower level officers or to, paralyze functioning factories and organizations. I think at the state level, that is a very important thing. And I would encourage other states to try and think of defense industrial parks.
Along those levels, yeah.
And again, alongside the defense industrial parks, I keep coming back to this. Most, by the way, did you know that penicillin usage for treatment of bacterial infections was pretty much a wartime discovery. Wars create a lot of havoc for human beings, but wars have also created scientific breakthroughs because innovation takes place. You're forced. Uh, Invention of radar or Project Manhattan. These are all forced on you because of a war. So if we have a flourishing defense industrial complex, the civilian spin-offs is something, again, we can start even now working on establishing that, because that creates great commercial viability for the industry. It goes beyond selling to friendly countries or export of equipment. It means using the same technology to create civilian products which can sell and make interesting revenues. So that I would split it between center and state. It's not all at center,
Right.
but of course key things are at the center. I think the center can't stop state government inspectors. That has to happen at the state level. But the center can fix its tax administration. It can. I don't think it can. Anyone, not even God, can fix any defense procurement process completely. But at least we can get 80-90% there, if not 100% there.
Right.
And I think very aggressive pursuit of industrial groups in India to get into this, of as long as we hold decent management control of joint ventures with friendly countries who are unlikely to embargo us in difficult times. I think these are things. And startups. Let's talk about startups. By the way, very interestingly, which is not talked about a great deal, in the last 10 years, in Southern California, not in Northern California, there's a huge bunch of defense startups. And they are all working on the assumption that the Pentagon will improve and change its, become more efficient and business friendly. And they are coming up with all kinds of interesting things. And there's a lot of Indian human capital in these, or Indian origin human capital in these defense startups. So that's another area where we can do a lot of collaboration of our own startups. Many of them are doing well, by the way. I'm surprised at the number of startups in defense area in India which are getting momentum. Yes, we know the world of startups. Most will fail. Doesn't matter, because we need that, and I think that is a big strength we have. If we can do that, and we can also collaborate with some of these new guys coming up in Southern California, many of whom are Indians, or have large numbers of Indian origin employees. So that's a big opportunity for the country. What this has proved, you see, till now, particularly leftist guys, they would constantly like critical stuff. India can't make anything, we have to import. They were almost sabotaging whatever India could do. But this time, DRDO, ISRO is also, it's one of the most efficient organizations in the world in terms of putting stuff in space. So it's very cost competitive. That they have done such a good job. We have Akash Tir, we have BrahMos, we have all kinds of things. Now look at BrahMos. It was a collaboration. And we are giving it away to Russia. We are over dependent on Russia. No, over the years, it has evolved into more India than Russia in the final product. So we've really taken control of the final product, and we are not at risk. So that's one thing that we need to, as I said, the best practices that we have. So this pessimism about India being able to make stuff has disappeared with Sindoor. And that's a big thing. And this constant making fun, making silly criticisms. Oh, don't do this. That is better. This is better. Oh, no. The important thing in defense is not just this old tendering process comparison, lowest price, this, that. It is about security. Who's reliable? Is France reliable? Those are the questions we have to ask. And how much can we do here? And how can we create a system that we can keep doing better and better? And not just better and better, but doing stuff that is world class, cutting edge, where we can be as good or better than others.
Absolutely.
On that note,
I mean, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, sir. I mean, I think a lot of important points to think about going ahead. Thank you so much, sir. This has been extremely insightful.
thank you.